On a gray Wednesday afternoon in the heart of Dayton, Ohio, the cafe on Main Street was unusually quiet. The lunch rush had ended, leaving behind the soft clatter of silverware and the faint hiss of the espresso machine. For most of the staff, it was a moment to breathe. But for one waitress, it was a moment she would never forget. Her name was Rachel Monroe, 26 years old, working double shifts just to keep her small apartment and her younger sister in community college. Rachel wasn't extraordinary by most standards. Her sneakers were worn, her ponytail hastily tied, but she had a habit of noticing the things other people ignored. That day, she noticed him. A man in his late 60s shuffled through the door, leaning heavily on a cane. His shoulders stooped beneath the weight of years, and his left leg dragged ever so slightly as if each step carried pain. He wore a veteran's cap, its fabric faded from decades of sun, the words Vietnam veteran stitched in thread that had begun to unravel. In his hands, he carried a cafeteria tray with trembling effort. The tray rattled as he tried to balance it, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim, a sandwich threatening to slide off. Most customers glanced up and then quickly looked away, their conversations resuming. But Rachel froze. Something about his hands, gnarled, stiff, uncooperative, told her the simple act of carrying a tray across the room was a battle he fought every day. Without thinking, Rachel crossed the cafe floor and gently touched the edge of the tray. "Here," she said softly, meeting his startled eyes. "Let me help you." The veteran blinked in surprise, his voice rough with embarrassment. "I don't want to be a bother." "You're not," Rachel insisted with a small smile. "It'd be my honor." And so, she walked with him, steadying the tray until they reached a corner table near the window. She set it down carefully, aligning the coffee so it wouldn't spill, placing napkins within easy reach. The man exhaled, relief washing over his face. "Thank you, miss. You've got no idea how much that helps." Rachel just smiled again, brushing it off. We all need a hand sometimes. For Rachel, it was nothing more than instinct, a reflex born of empathy. For the veteran, it was dignity restored. For the cafe, it was supposed to be just another forgettable moment. But then, a voice cut through the quiet like a whip. "Rachel!" Heads turned. At the counter, her manager, Douglas Pratt, stood stiff with rage. His tie hung crooked, his face flushed, and in his hand was the order pad he slammed against the counter. "What do you think you're doing?" he barked, striding forward. Rachel straightened, confused. "I was just—" "You were just what?" "Interrupting your shift to play hero? We don't coddle customers here. Do your job." The veteran's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. A hush spread across the cafe as every customer turned their attention to the confrontation. Phones quietly lifted into recording positions. Rachel felt her cheeks burn. "Sir," he was struggling. "I couldn't just—" "You could and you should have," Douglas snapped, his voice rising. "You're here to serve tables, not babysit old men." Gasps rippled through the cafe. One woman near the counter muttered, "Unbelievable," loud enough to be heard. The veteran's hand clenched around his cane, his knuckles white. Rachel's voice trembled but held firm. "With respect, Mr. Pratt, helping a customer isn't against my job. It's being human." That sentence sealed it. Douglas's eyes blazed. "You're fired. Right here, right now. Get your apron off and leave." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The only sound was the quiet hum of the espresso machine. Then the cafe erupted, not with applause, not with anger, but with the sound of phones capturing every second. Rachel's simple act of kindness had become something else entirely. What no one knew, not Douglas, not Rachel, not even the veteran, was that this single confrontation would ignite a storm that would sweep far beyond the cafe walls. And the world was about to choose sides. Rachel stood frozen, apron strings dangling in her trembling hands. Around her, the cafe erupted into a low storm of whispers, murmurs, and the unmistakable glow of phone screens recording everything. Douglas, red-faced and sweating, jabbed a finger toward the door. "Out. Now." Before I call security. But before Rachel could move, the veteran shifted in his seat, his cane scraping loudly against the tile. He pushed himself upright with great effort, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "This young lady did nothing wrong," he said, his tone sharp with indignation. "She showed me respect. Something this place clearly doesn't understand." The cafe went silent again. Douglas turned on him, sneering. "Sir, I don't care who you are." But he never finished. A woman at the counter slammed her coffee down so hard the lid popped off. "Are you serious?" she snapped. "She helped a veteran." "And you're firing her?" another voice chimed in. "I've got this on video," said a man in a baseball cap, holding up his phone. "The whole internet's about to know exactly what kind of boss you are." Douglas faltered for a moment, but pride made him dig in deeper. "You think I'm afraid of people on their phones?" She broke company policy. End of discussion. Rachel's heart hammered in her chest. Company policy? There was no policy against kindness. She wanted to argue, to shout, but she felt the weight of every eye in the cafe pressing down on her. Then the veteran spoke again, his voice lower, filled with quiet steel. "Name's Henry Callahan. United States Marine Corps. 2 tours in Vietnam. Lost half the men I served with. And you think helping me carry a tray is a fireable offense? Son, you don't know the first thing about service." Gasps filled the room. Henry's words sliced through the air like a blade. Rachel blinked back tears. She hadn't even known his name until that moment. Douglas's lips pressed into a thin, furious line, but the damage was already spreading beyond those 4 walls. The man in the baseball cap uploaded his video to Facebook before Douglas had even turned away. The caption read, "Waitress fired for helping a disabled veteran. Share this if you think kindness matters more than corporate pride." Within minutes, the video was on Twitter. Within an hour, TikTok users stitched themselves into the footage, faces red with outrage, voices shaking as they demanded justice for Rachel and Henry. By evening, hashtags began trending. #JusticeForRachel and #RespectOurVets. Rachel sat in her car outside the cafe, staring blankly at the steering wheel. Her phone buzzed non-stop, friends, strangers, even local reporters messaging her, asking for her side of the story. She couldn't breathe. She hadn't wanted this. She just wanted to help. Meanwhile, Henry sat at his kitchen table across town, watching the video play over and over. His daughter had sent it to him with the words, "Dad, you're going viral." He didn't care about going viral. But for the first time in years, people were listening to him, not as a burden, not as an old man with shaky hands, but as a voice of truth. By nightfall, Rachel's story was on the local news. The anchor's voice was solemn as footage from the cafe played on the screen. "Dayton waitress Rachel Monroe was fired today for assisting a disabled veteran," the anchor said. "The incident has sparked outrage across social media, with calls for the cafe's management to issue an apology and reinstate her immediately. The veteran, Henry Callahan, spoke with us earlier this evening." The camera cut to Henry, sitting tall in his chair, his Marine cap perched proudly on his head. "She didn't deserve that," he said firmly. "All she did was help." If that's wrong, then maybe the problem isn't her, it's the people in charge. Back at the cafe, Douglas watched the broadcast on the mounted TV near the barista station. His face turned ashen as he saw the comment section scrolling across the bottom of the screen. "Boycott Main Street Cafe! Support Rachel, kindness is not a crime. Never eating there again." By morning, the cafe's Yelp page was flooded with 1-star reviews. Customers who had never even set foot inside were calling for Douglas's resignation. Rachel woke up to over 100 unread messages. Some offered her jobs. Some called her a hero. Others, mostly trolls hiding behind anonymous profiles, called her names she couldn't repeat. She felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. What had started as a small act of kindness had become a public battlefield. And the question hung heavy in the air: what would happen when kindness clashed head-on with cruelty, and the whole world was watching? The next morning, Douglas awoke to chaos. His phone buzzed nonstop with texts from the cafe's owner, furious voicemails piling up one after another. By 7 a.m., a news van was parked outside Main Street Cafe. By 9 a.m., protesters gathered with homemade signs. Kindness is not a crime. Justice for Rachel. Respect our veterans. Inside, the cafe was empty. Tables that once overflowed with regulars sat bare. The smell of burnt coffee lingered as Douglas paced the floor, sweat staining his collar. For Rachel, the morning began differently. She awoke to find hundreds of strangers had donated to a GoFundMe started overnight. The description read, "Rachel Monroe stood up for what's right. Let's stand up for her." The total ticked past $30,000 before she even got out of bed. She sat at the kitchen table in stunned silence, scrolling through messages. Offers from restaurants in the city. Invitations to appear on talk shows. Letters of gratitude from veterans' families. Her hands shook. Yesterday she was a waitress. Today she was a symbol. Henry called her that afternoon. His voice was steady but full of warmth. "Rachel, I've been waiting all day to say this. You remind me of the Marines I served with. You didn't back down. You showed courage when no one else would. And that matters more than you'll ever know." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean for all this to happen. I just couldn't stand there and do nothing." "That," Henry said softly, "is exactly why people are standing with you." By evening, the story had spread nationwide. Major news outlets carried headlines. Waitress fired for helping veterans sparks national outrage. Politicians weighed in. Some demanded workplace reform laws. Others called for boycotts of Main Street Cafe. Douglas tried to salvage his reputation with a shaky press conference. Cameras captured him stumbling over his words, attempting to explain company policy, while a crowd booed behind him. A reporter asked bluntly, "Do you regret firing her?" He stammered, then admitted, "Mistakes were made." But it was too late. The cafe's owner announced Douglas had been relieved of his duties, effective immediately. Rachel found out not from the news, but from Henry, who knocked gently on her door that evening. She opened it to find him standing tall in his Marine cap, cane in hand, eyes shining with pride. "It's over," he said with a smile. "You won." Rachel laughed through tears, disbelief washing over her. "I didn't win anything." "Yes, you did," Henry replied. "You showed this whole country that kindness still matters. That one person can draw a line and change everything." The two of them sat together on her porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. Around them, neighbors waved and stopped to say thank you. Cars slowed, passengers shouting words of encouragement out their windows. Rachel felt a peace she hadn't known in days. She still didn't have a job, but she had something bigger: dignity, respect, and a community that refused to let cruelty go unchecked. Weeks later, she stood beside Henry at a veterans fundraiser. She'd been invited as a guest speaker, her story now a beacon of hope. As she looked out at the crowd, faces lit with admiration, she realized that her life had shifted forever. Not because she lost her job, but because, for once, the world had listened. Epilogue. The cafe never recovered. It shut down within 6 months. Rachel, however, was offered a new job at a restaurant that proudly advertised, "Where kindness is always on the menu." Henry became a local hero too, his words replayed endlessly in the viral video. She didn't deserve that. All she did was help. Their friendship endured. And whenever someone asked Rachel if she regretted what happened that day, she would smile softly and say, "If I had to do it all over again, I'd still carry that tray."